not just prepared, though, he's also proven. There are 3 temptations here. I'm going to take you through them one at a time, and I'm going to read the verses that have to do with them. And if you look at your sheets, I've shown you the temptation and then what Jesus says about it, so you can kind of see where his answers lie, because they're sort of come in terms of questions. So the first temptation that Jesus goes through is a temptation to dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction. If you look at the end of verse 2 down through 4, it says, he ate nothing during those days, and at the end of them was hungry. You know, duh. Okay? The devil said to him, if you are the Son of God, tell this stone to become bread. Jesus answered, it is written, man does not live on bread alone. So after 40 days in the wilderness, by the way, the wilderness of Judea is like desert and rock. It's very hot. There's nothing there, no shade trees, just scrub brushes and small animals, and it's nasty. But after 40 days of being out there, it says he was hungry, and there's never been a more understated thing in the world than after 40 days out in the desert being hungry. If he didn't eat anything, he's not only hungry, he's in a hungry place. He's in a thirsty place. He's in a very desolate place. And so the devil comes along when he is at his absolute bottom and says something to him. He insinuates something. You know, I love every time you get the words of the devil in the Bible, you don't even have to try to hear the sort of, you know, like forked tongueness of what he says. You just have to close your eyes and listen to the way middle school students talk to their parents, and it pretty much kind of sounds like this, you know, like, Mom, you know, kind of like insinuation, everything that's loaded up. I love my middle school students a lot. I miss middle school. Anyway, he says to Jesus, if you are the Son, you hear that? If you are the Son of God, you can kind of hear it just digging in him like that. Now, I don't know about you, but what I'd love is for him just to punch the devil in the nose and end it all right there. But he doesn't do that. I don't know if the devil has a nose or not. I really don't. But he obviously was paying attention to the very last time God spoke, which was a couple of verses back at the baptism of Jesus, when God looks down from heaven and he says in a booming voice so that the whole world can hear it, this is my Son in whom I am well pleased. Next time somebody talks, if you are the Son of God, you see that? He's attacking Jesus' sonship. He's attacking Jesus' sonship, but he doesn't do it, you know, like in the way that, you know, like I said before in haranguing the middle school, like a middle school student, well, he doesn't just get right up in his grill and say, you're not the Son of God. No, it's insinuating. It's on the sly. It invites interpretation. It invites you to think. Okay? If you are the Son of God, turn the stone to bread. Again, Jesus could have turned stone to bread without even thinking about it, and probably had to control his impulses and urges not to do it. So the devil's trying to exploit him. He's trying to say, you know, if you are the Son of God, why don't you use your power to serve yourself? You got all this power, why don't you use some of it? Jesus responds simply by saying, man shall not live by bread alone. In other words, he says, the Father knows what I need, and I don't need anything other than what my Father says I need. Who would know better than him? Certainly not I. I don't want to trust anybody but God alone. He's my Father, and I will trust him. Man, there's a good lesson in there for those of us who have fathers that we have trouble listening to and believing they have our good in mind. Jesus trusted his Father. I wonder if we trust ours. He's quoting from the Old Testament, of course, and Jesus doesn't just enter this battle without country. He's doing this battle in behalf of Israel. He's identified as an Israelite. He was a Jew, after all. And he's in the desert, not any desert. He's in the Judean wilderness. He's in the wilderness of Israel. And he's doing battle like the wilderness wanderers did during Moses' time, only with a much better outcome. Because in their time and in their place, in Deuteronomy, they didn't do so good. And Jesus goes back and quotes that verse out of Deuteronomy 8:3 so that he can identify himself with those 40 years of the Jews wandering around in the desert. And if you remember, the main sin that they had, all the grumbling and complaining that they had, it was fueled by dissatisfaction. They didn't like the provisions. They didn't like the scarcity of water. They didn't like that they didn't have meat. They actually described the menu back in Egypt. Oh, that we would have the pots of meat, and oh, that we would have the leeks and the garlic and all the beans and all the cucumbers that they had, you know, fish and salad that we had back there Egypt, but oh no, you dragged us out here in the desert. See, God was testing their ability to trust him over Pharaoh. They said, man, we wish we were back with Pharaoh. He was bad, but at least he fed us well. I'm going to cough drop myself so that you don't have to hear me cough into this very expensive microphone. But Israel was dissatisfied with the manna. They didn't like that. They didn't like the kind of water that they had. They just didn't like all that stuff. And so the devil is trying to get them to think for themselves. He's trying to get Jesus to think for himself. He's trying to get them to be dissatisfied with God on some level. It's the same thing he did to Eve. He comes up to Eve, and by the way, that was about food again. Just saying. Okay, so the Israelites in the wilderness, food. In the Garden of Eden, food. And never mind that you've got the world at your fingertips. You can have any kind of food you want, Eve, but you want the one tiny iota fruit that you can't have. And that's where he attacked her. But he attacked her in a way that invited her to think for herself, to think independently. Now listen, I don't care how old you are or where you came from. Every one of us has a temptation to be so independent, so independently minded, we don't want anybody else's opinion getting on us. We don't want to hear what you've got to say. Well, we don't want our boss to tell us, our teacher to tell us, our mother or father, or God forbid, a grandparent come and share some of their wisdom with us, because I got to think for myself. Now listen, that might have gotten America where it is today, but let me tell you where it'll get you with God. Bad places. That's where the devil lives, is, hey, think for yourself. Maybe God's done as good as he claims. Maybe you should think about this for a little while. What was it God exactly said, Eve? Did God really say you cannot eat from any of the trees in the garden? Okay? The real hunger here, the real temptation, is not just a physical one. It's not just physically that Jesus is hungry for something. It's a hunger that goes outside the bounds of what God's provided. And the real hunger here is a spiritual one. It's one that longs for something that's on a forbidden tree someplace. And Jesus proved faithful. He didn't give in to the hunger of dissatisfaction with God. That's a very real hunger, to be hungry and dissatisfied. You guys all know this. If you ever are hungry for something and you end up at the mall to eat, and you force yourself to eat something at the mall that you really didn't want to eat, but they didn't really have what you wanted, you couldn't make your mind up, and as soon as you eat it, you know, this is not what I wanted. Then you wander around all afternoon going, why in the world did I go there and eat that? You know what I'm talking about? It's like when you want something good, and you go down there and you buy $2.99, buffet, Chinese buffet or whatever, and you eat it, and you're thinking, but I wanted a steak. I wanted that cheeseburger, and I ended up with this. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Dissatisfaction. It used to happen to me all the time because I worked in the mall around Christmas, and about lunchtime or so, not right at lunchtime, but before, when you get that 11 o'clock in the morning hungry and it's not time for lunch yet, and so somebody walks in the door with Cinnabon, and you go, oh man, I'm so hungry. And you eat a Cinnabon that they offer to you because they made you. And you start eating it, and you think to yourself, why am I eating this? It's like I just poured a 5-pound bag of sugar down my throat. This is not what I needed or what I wanted. As soon as you eat it, you kind of feel sick. Like, whoa, I'm not even diabetic, and I think I need a shot. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Dissatisfaction with your provision. And you think, well, God must have given it to me. I better shut my mouth. Okay? That's what the devil attacks us, is being dissatisfied with our provisions. I remember when I was in 7th grade, first day of 7th grade, I walked into my first hour class. It was history. And my teacher was Mrs. Young. And she's a really good teacher. And I had all these questions about history. I don't know why, but for some reason I became really interested in World War II. And I was just fascinated by the cruelty of Adolf Hitler and how he did what he did. And I remember seeing his speeches on TV when they would replay them, and all the vintage war footage they'd play of him getting 100,000 troops to be assembled with all their colors and everything. I remember raising my hand on day 1 of 7th grade and saying to my teacher, how did Adolf Hitler get several million, reasonable, rational Germans to say, the Jew's a dog, we should kill them? I mean, how do you get people to be provoked to that kind of cruelty? And she said it's really simple. The German people were starving to death. And he showed up and had the food. And he said, the Jew's a dog, now here's some bread. And at first they went, the what? Who? I'm sorry, what? Oh, bread? Fine. So they go home to their crying children who are starving and haven't eaten in a few days and feed them. And then the next time they're starving, he comes along again and said, here's a potato. By the way, the Jew is a dog and we should run them out of Germany. Huh, really? Interesting. And over time, rational people, because of their hunger, begin to do irrational things. Our hungers can lead us into all kinds of temptations. But you know, the good news is Jesus' stomach may have been empty, but his heart was full of God.
Lord.
And he withstood the temptation. The temptation to dissatisfaction with God, Jesus' answer is trust God alone. Trust God alone. Don't trust yourself. Don't trust your hunger. Don't trust the world around you. Don't trust the desert. Trust God alone.